$500 fanned across the pristine marble, an insult disguised as a tip. Isabella's stomach clenched. The city's elite watched, expecting her, the waitress, to cower before the billionaire. They didn't know her grandfather's ghost stood beside her, whispering, "Remember." But they had misjudged the lamb. In 5 minutes, she would utter 7 words that would ignite a war, and by morning, a multi-million-dollar limousine would become a weapon aimed right at her. The air in Ethelgard's was a carefully curated symphony of quiet success. The clinking of heavy silver on bone china, the hushed murmur of conversations about mergers and acquisitions, and the almost imperceptible scent of old money and expensive perfume. It was an environment designed to soothe the egos of men like Donovan Sinclair, a titan of private equity, whose face was a regular feature on the covers of business magazines. Tonight he was holding court, his voice a low growl that effortlessly cut through the restaurant's polite hum. Isabella Rossi understood this world, but only as an observer, a ghost in a crisp black uniform. For 2 years she had navigated the treacherous currents of Ethelgard's balancing trays, laden with lobster thermidor and pouring vintages that cost more than her monthly rent. She was good at her job, efficient, unobtrusive, and gifted with an uncanny ability to anticipate the needs of the city's elite. She was invisible, and that was her armor. Tonight, however, her armor was failing. Mr. Sinclair was not in a good mood. His companion, a model, whose age barely eclipsed the vintage of the wine he'd ordered, looked bored and beautiful, a decorative object Sinclair occasionally used to emphasize a point. His actual focus was on asserting his dominance over his surroundings. He had sent back his steak twice, once for being too rare, the second time for being too charred. He had complained that the ambient lighting was unflattering to his guest, and now for the third time his fork lay on the floor, a silver gauntlet thrown down for her to retrieve. Isabella approached the table, her heart a steady, resentful drum against her ribs. She had seen Sinclair in the restaurant before. He was known for his tempestuous moods and his abysmal tipping, a strange combination for a man whose net worth was a dozen-digit figure. "My apologies, sir," she said, her voice a practiced, neutral murmur. She bent down, her movements fluid, and picked up the fork with a small pair of silver tongs she carried for just such occasions. Sinclair didn't even look at her. He was telling a story to his companion, his hand gesturing dismissively in Isabella's direction. "The service here has gone to the dogs. It's impossible to find good help these days. People with no pride, no ambition." Isabella placed a new polished fork on the table beside his plate. The model giggled, a sound like wind chimes in a vacuum. The words meant to be about a faceless, abstract concept of help landed on Isabella like small, sharp stones. Pride. She worked 60 hours a week here to pay for her mother's medical bills and to save for a community college course. Ambition. She dreamed of one day opening a small bakery, a place that smelled of yeast and sugar, not entitlement. She was about to retreat, to melt back into the shadows, when Sinclair finally turned his gaze on her. His eyes were a startlingly pale blue cold, and assessing like a winter sky. "You waitress, my wine glass has been empty for at least 2 minutes. Are you new?" "No, sir," Isabella replied, her composure stretched thin. "I've been your server all evening. Evidently not a very attentive one." He sneered. "What's your name?" "Isabella, sir." He savored the name, rolling it around his tongue as if tasting a cheap wine. "Isabella. Well, Isabella, I'm feeling generous tonight. Despite the deplorable service, I'm willing to make this a memorable evening for you." He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored jacket and pulled out a thick folded clip of $100 bills. He peeled off 5 and tossed them onto the table. They scattered near her hand. "There's $500, he said, his voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "That's for you to ensure my glass never ever goes empty again, and that you remain silent unless spoken to. See how easy that is?" A little motivation. A hush fell over their section of the dining room. The air grew thick with a mixture of embarrassment and morbid curiosity. This wasn't just a tip. It was a transaction, a purchase of her dignity. Isabella looked at the crisp bills lying on the white tablecloth. She saw her mother's prescription costs, the overdue electricity bill, a brief moment of respite from the crushing weight of her life. Then she looked at Sinclair's smug, expectant face. She saw the casual cruelty, the belief that everything and everyone had a price tag. Something inside her, a quiet, resilient core she had inherited from her late grandfather, snapped. She did not touch the money. She stood up straight, her 5'5" frame suddenly feeling as tall as his. She met his cold blue eyes, and for the first time that night, she spoke not as a waitress, but as a person. "Thank you for the offer, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady, devoid of the tremor she felt in her soul. "But I can't accept that." Sinclair's smile faltered. "What did you say?" "My job is to ensure you have a pleasant dining experience, and that includes keeping your wine glass full. I don't require any extra motivation to do my job." She pushed the bills back towards him with the edge of her notepad. "I'm sorry, sir, but you can't buy respect." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The model's jaw was slightly agape. The couple at the next table, a prominent real estate developer and his wife, froze with their forks halfway to their mouths. Mr. Peterson, the restaurant manager, was already moving towards them from across the room, his face a mask of pure panic. Donovan Sinclair stared at her. His face, which had been a canvas of arrogant amusement, slowly hardened into something dark and dangerous. The blue in his eyes turned to ice. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The venom was in the chilling quiet of his words. "You will regret saying that." He whispered each word a promise. He stood up abruptly, threw his napkin onto his half-eaten steak, and without another glance at his date or the money, he turned and walked out of the restaurant. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind him, leaving a wake of stunned silence, and the $500 still sitting on the table, a testament to a battle that had just begun. Mr. Peterson arrived at the table, his face pale. He looked at Isabella, then at the money, then at the closing doors. "What have you done?" he breathed. The first light of dawn was just beginning to spill over the city's jagged skyline when Isabella arrived for her morning shift. A sense of dread had settled in the pit of her stomach, a cold, heavy stone that had been there since she left work the previous night. Mr. Peterson had been furious, his words a frantic babble of lost business, powerful enemies, and you have no idea who you've crossed. He had sent her home, telling her to pray that Mr. Sinclair was the forgiving type, a notion Isabella found laughable. But nothing could have prepared her for the sight that greeted her at the entrance to Ethelgard's. It was a limousine, but calling it a limousine was like calling a great white shark a fish. It was a custom-built, elongated phantom of a vehicle, gleaming obsidian black, even in the dim morning light. It was impossibly absurdly long, stretched to a length that seemed to defy both physics and good taste, and it was parked directly in front of the restaurant's main entrance, its front bumper mere inches from the ornate glass doors, its rear end extending far enough to block the adjacent service alley. It wasn't parked. It was a blockade, a fortress wall of polished chrome and tinted glass. A small crowd had gathered, confused kitchen staff delivery drivers with their hands on their hips and the florist holding a bucket of fresh lees, all staring at the silent, monolithic vehicle. "What the hell is this?" grumbled one of the chefs, his arms crossed over his white jacket. Isabella knew. Her dread solidified into a sickening certainty. This was Sinclair's response. It was more audacious, more theatrical, and infinitely more powerful than any shouting match or bad review. It was a display of effortless, crushing power. He hadn't just retaliated. He had turned his wealth into a physical weapon. Standing impassively by the driver's door was a man who seemed as solid and unmovable as the car itself. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, with a face that was a study in neutrality. He wore no expression, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. This was Arthur Sinclair's driver, a man who was as much a fixture of his public persona as his custom-made suits. Mr. Peterson was already there, his face a blotchy, panicked red. He was pleading with Arthur. "You can't do this. This is a private business. We have deliveries. Stuff. I'm calling the police." Arthur didn't even turn his head. His voice when he finally spoke was a low, calm baritone that carried no hint of emotion. "I am under instructions to wait for Mr. Sinclair." "Wait for him. He's not here. You're blocking our entire operation. My instructions are clear." Arthur repeated, his gaze fixed on some distant point. The police did arrive, two uniformed officers looking bewildered by the scale of the problem. They spoke to Arthur, who politely provided his license and the vehicle's registration. It was all in order. They pointed out the numerous parking violations, the obstruction of a commercial entrance. Arthur simply nodded and absorbed the tickets they issued, placing them neatly on the dashboard. The car was legally registered. It was not stolen. The driver was cooperating. There was very little they could do besides issue fines that were to Donovan Sinclair less than pocket change. The limo did not move. By 9:00 a.m., the situation had escalated into a full-blown crisis for Ethelgard's. The morning prep crew couldn't get their equipment in. The produce delivery truck was forced to double park down the street, its perishable goods wilting in the warming air. The linen service couldn't drop off the clean tablecloths. The restaurant, a machine of meticulous precision, was grinding to a halt. The financial bleeding had begun. Isabella stood to the side, wrapped in a suffocating cloak of guilt and fury. Every frustrated sigh from her coworkers, every frantic phone call Mr. Peterson made, felt like a personal accusation. Chloe, her closest friend at the restaurant, came to stand beside her. "This is insane," Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. "He's really doing this because you wouldn't take his money. He's doing this to prove he can," Isabella replied, her voice tight. It was then that Mr. Peterson stormed over to her, his face a mask of desperation. "Isabella, this is your fault. You and your pride. That car has been here for 3 hours. It's costing us thousands of dollars every minute. You need to fix this." "How am I supposed to fix it?" Isabella asked, her own anger rising. "He's the one breaking the law. He's not breaking it enough," Mr. Peterson shot back, his voice cracking. "The fines mean nothing to him. You need to call him. You need to apologize. You need to beg him to move that monstrosity." The ultimatum hung in the air between them. The choice was clear: her job and the livelihoods of her colleagues, or her dignity. The very thing she had refused to sell was now being demanded of her as a sacrifice. Defeated, she nodded. She would have to make the call. She would have to gravel. Sinclair had won. As she pulled out her phone, her hands trembling, a subtle detail she hadn't noticed before caught her eye. On the back of Arthur's impassive head, just below his collar, was a small, faded tattoo. It was a bird, a swift, she thought, with its wings outstretched. A flicker of something, a memory so distant it was more of a feeling than an image stirred in her mind. A similar drawing scribbled in the margins of an old book her grandfather used to own, a book about engineering and design. The memory was gone as quickly as it came, leaving behind a faint, unsettling echo. Why did that simple tattoo feel so familiar? The thought was pushed aside by the immediate crisis. She didn't have Sinclair's number, but Mr. Peterson quickly provided it, scrolled on the back of a receipt. With the weight of every eye upon her, she found the contact and pressed call, preparing to swallow her pride and beg for mercy. The phone rang 3 times, each tone echoing the frantic beat of Isabella's heart. She expected a secretary, or perhaps for the call to be sent straight to voicemail. Instead, the line connected, and Donovan Sinclair's voice, smooth and laced with smug victory, came through. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said without any preamble. "Mr. Sinclair," Isabella began the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. "This is Isabella Rossi from Ethelgard's. I am calling about the car." "The car?" He feigned ignorance. "Oh, the limo. Beautiful, isn't it? A custom job. I was just having it detailed and told Arthur to wait for me in that area. Is there a problem?" The condescension in his tone was a physical thing pressing down on her. "Sir, it's blocking the entire restaurant. We can't operate. My manager, we're losing business." "That does sound like a problem," Sinclair said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "A problem for your manager, not for me." "Please," Isabella begged, hating the weakness in her own voice. "What do you want me to do? I'll apologize. I was wrong to speak to you that way." There was a pause. She could almost hear him smiling. "An apology. It's a little late for that, Isabella. You wanted to make a point about respect. I'm making a point about consequences. Perhaps by tomorrow, when your manager has to lay off the kitchen staff, You'll all have a newfound respect for the simple realities of commerce. He chuckled a dry, cruel sound. Have a nice day. The line went dead. Isabella lowered the phone, her face pale. Every head in the small crowd of staff was turned towards her, their expressions a mixture of pity and accusation. Mr. Peterson looked utterly defeated. So that's it, he said, his shoulders slumping. He's going to ruin me over a waitress's comment. He didn't say it with malice, but with the flat finality of a death sentence. He looked at Isabella. I'm sorry. You have to go. I can't have you here. Clear out your locker. Tears of frustration and helplessness welled in Isabella's eyes. She had lost. She had stood up for herself for a fleeting moment, and in return, her life was being systematically dismantled. She turned away from the sympathetic gaze of Chloe and the despair of her other co-workers walking toward the staff entrance to collect her few belongings. It was over. As she reached the corner, a voice, calm and feminine, cut through the morning's chaos. Ms. Rosie, Isabella. Rossi. Isabella turned. A woman was standing there looking completely out of place in the grubby service alley. She was in her late 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back into an elegant shiny. She wore a tailored gray suit that screamed expensive lawyer, and she held a slim leather briefcase in one hand. Yes, Isabella said, wiping her eyes. My name is Evelyn Reed, the woman said, extending a hand. Her handshake was firm and cool. I'm an attorney. I'd like to speak with you for a moment, if you have the time. It's a matter of some urgency. Isabella was confused. A lawyer? I don't have any money. I can't afford a lawyer. You won't have to, Evelyn Reed said with a faint, reassuring smile. I'm not here for you to retain me. I represent a client who has a vested interest in Mr. Sinclair's public and private conduct. My client was made aware of the incident at Ethgard's last night and of the situation this morning. She gestured with her head towards the monolithic limo. A client who I'm not at liberty to disclose that just yet, Evelyn said smoothly. What I am at liberty to do is offer you our assistance. My client is prepared to offer you full legal protection. Furthermore, they are prepared to compensate you for your lost wages from this job for as long as it takes. Isabella stared at her dumbfounded. It felt like a dream. Why? Why would anyone do that for me? Let's just say my client believes in standing up to bullies, Evelyn replied, her eyes twinkling with a hint of something more, something personal. And they believe you have shown a great deal of courage. They want to ensure Mr. Sinclair doesn't make an example of you. The offer was too good to be true, a lifeline thrown into the turbulent waters that were drowning her. But skepticism was a hardwired survival instinct. I don't understand. What's the catch? Evelyn Reed's smile was patient. There is no catch, Miss Rosie. Only a condition that you don't back down, that you see this through. We believe Mr. Sinclair has finally overplayed his hand. This is a public spectacle, and we want to use it. She opened her briefcase and took out a business card in a simple, unadorned envelope. This is my card. Call me anytime. And this, she handed Isabella the envelope, is to cover your immediate expenses. A gesture of good faith from my client. Inside, Isabella would later find was $10,000 in cash. Her mind was reeling, trying to process the sudden seismic shift in her reality. A secret benefactor, a high-powered lawyer. Just as she was trying to formulate a question, Evelyn reached back into her briefcase. One more thing, she said, her tone shifting slightly. This may seem strange, but my client was insistent. I am to ask you if you recognize the people in this photograph. She handed Isabella a small, old photograph, its edges yellowed with age. It was a black and white picture of a young man and a young woman standing in front of what looked like an old workshop. The man was handsome with a brilliant, optimistic smile and a shock of dark hair. The woman was elegant and beautiful, though her smile was more reserved, almost sad. They looked happy, caught in a moment of shared purpose. Isabella stared at the faces. They were complete strangers. No, she said, shaking her head. I've never seen them before in my life. Who are they? Evelyn Reed's gaze was sharp, analytical. Are you certain? Look at the man. Does he not resemble anyone in your family? Isabella looked again harder this time. There was something in the man's eyes, a familiar spark of intensity, but it was fleeting, like a half-remembered dream. "I don't think so," she said, handing the photo back. "I'm sorry." Evelyn took the photo, her expression unreadable. "Very well," she said. "Keep the envelope, Miss Rosie, and call me. The first thing we'll do is file a civil suit against Mr. Sinclair for harassment and tortious interference. It's time someone put a leash on him." With another small smile, Evelyn Reed turned and walked away, her heels clicking purposefully on the pavement, leaving Isabella standing in the alley, clutching an envelope full of cash, a lawyer's business card, and a head full of bewildering questions. Who was this mysterious client? And why did the face of a stranger in an old photograph feel like a key to a door she never knew existed? The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. The limo remained a silent monument to one man's ego. News vans had begun to arrive, drawn by the scent of a story involving a well-known billionaire and a bizarre public display. The tale being spun was one of a disgruntled employee, a trivial workplace squabble that had spun out of control. Isabella's name wasn't mentioned, but she felt the sting of the implication in every news report. She went home not to the small apartment she shared with her mother, but to a mid-range hotel suite, booked and paid for by the efficient and mysterious Evelyn Reed. The lawyer had insisted, citing concerns for her safety and the potential for media harassment. Alone in the sterile, impersonal room, Isabella finally opened the envelope. The sight of the neatly stacked $100 bills made her feel lightheaded. It was more money than she had ever seen in one place. But it wasn't the money that consumed her thoughts. It was the photograph, the face of the man. His bright, hopeful eyes, the confident set of his jaw, had lodged itself in her mind. Evelyn's question echoed, "Does he not resemble anyone in your family?" On impulse, she took a picture of the photograph with her phone before Evelyn had put it away. Now she pulled up the image, staring at it intently. She zoomed in on the man's face, and then she saw it. It wasn't an exact match, not after decades had passed, but the shape of the eyes, the way his hair grew from his temple. It was her grandfather, a much younger, more vibrant version of the quiet, weary man she had known in his final years. Her grandfather, Antonio Rossi, had passed away 5 years ago. He had been a carpenter and a tinkerer, a man whose hands were always stained with wood, varnish, or grease. His workshop filled with half-finished projects and fantastical sketches of inventions that never came to be. He had been a gentle soul, but there was always a current of melancholy running beneath his surface, a sadness about a past he rarely spoke of. He'd only ever said he was pushed out of a promising business partnership when he was a young man, a vague story of betrayal that had cast a long shadow over his life, her hands trembling. Isabella called her mother. "Mama," she said, her voice tight with emotion, "I need you to be honest with me. I'm going to send you a picture. Who is the man in it?" She sent the image and waited, her heart pounding against the hotel room silence. A minute later, her mother's reply came not as a text, but as a choked sob over the phone. "Isabella, where did you get this?" Her mother, Elena, whispered, "A lawyer showed it to me today." "Mama, that's no-no, isn't it?" "Yes," Elena cried softly. "That is your grandfather before everything and the woman?" Her voice broke. "That is Eleanor Sinclair." The name hit Isabella like a physical blow. Sinclair, as in Donovan Sinclair, his mother. Elena confirmed, her voice thick with old pain. "Eleanor was your grandfather's friend and her husband, Augustus Sinclair. He was your grandfather's business partner." The carefully constructed walls of Isabella's world began to crumble. "Partner Nono told me he was pushed out of a small workshop." "It wasn't a small workshop, Isabella," Elena said, the story tumbling out of her as if a dam had finally broken after decades of silence. "It was the beginning. Your grandfather Antonio was a brilliant designer, a visionary. Augustus Sinclair was the businessman, the one with the connections. Together, they founded Sinclair Rossi Automotive Concepts. It was their dream." Elena explained that Antonio had designed a revolutionary new type of fuel injection system, one that was vastly more efficient and powerful than anything on the market. It was his genius, his invention. They were on the cusp of securing a major manufacturing deal that would have made them both wealthy and successful beyond their wildest dreams. "What happened?" Isabella asked, her voice barely a whisper. Augustus Sinclair happened, her mother said, her tone hardening with a bitterness that had been fermenting for 50 years. He saw the future, and he wanted all of it for himself. He used his legal knowledge to create a complex partnership agreement, one your grandfather, who trusted him completely, signed without fully understanding. A week before the big deal was finalized, Augustus invoked a clause accusing Antonio of financial mismanagement, a complete fabrication, and legally dissolved the partnership, seizing all the assets that included the patents for the fuel injection system. He pushed your grandfather out with nothing, not a single penny. The story was devastating. A secret history of theft and betrayal that explained everything. Her grandfather's quiet sadness, their family's constant financial struggle, the inherited sense that something had been stolen from them. Augustus Sinclair built his entire empire on your grandfather's stolen work, Elena continued. He renamed the company Sinclair Industries, and that fuel system became the foundation of their fortune. Donovan inherited a kingdom built on a lie. And Elena, she knew it was wrong. She tried to reason with Augustus, but he was a ruthless man. She never forgave him. She died a few years later, some say of a broken heart. Isabella felt a wave of cold fury wash over her. This wasn't about a rude comment at dinner anymore. This wasn't about a blocked entrance or a lost job. This was about a generational injustice. Her defiance in the face of Donovan Sinclair was not an isolated act. It was an echo of a battle her grandfather had lost half a century ago. "Mama," Isabella said, her voice shaking with a newfound steely resolve. "Is there any proof anything left from that time?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Your grandfather was a meticulous man," Elena said slowly. "He was heartbroken, but he was not stupid. He knew he had been cheated. He kept everything. He hid it away in an old trunk in the attic. He said it was a reminder of what happens when you trust the wrong people." "What's in the trunk, Mama?" "His copies of everything," she replied. "His original workshop blueprints, hand-drawn and signed notes, and his copy of the partnership agreement, the one Augustus Sinclair used against him. On the back of it, your grandfather spent weeks writing down every detail of the betrayal, every conversation, every lie. He said one day the truth would matter." Suddenly, the mysterious lawyer, the anonymous client, it all started to make a terrifying kind of sense. Someone else knew the story. Someone else knew that the foundation of the entire Sinclair empire was rotten to its core. "Mama," Isabella said, standing up, her mind racing, "I need you to find that trunk." The truth, it seemed, was about to matter a great deal. Armed with the shattering truth of her family's past, Isabella felt a profound shift within herself. The fear and helplessness that had plagued her were burned away by a cold, clarifying anger. She was no longer just a waitress who had been wronged. She was the custodian of a stolen legacy. Her fight with Donovan Sinclair had become her grandfather's fight, and she would not lose. She called Evelyn Reed immediately, her voice steady and firm. "I know who the man in the photograph is," she said without preamble. "It's my grandfather, Antonio Rossi, and I know what Augustus Sinclair did to him." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, followed by a soft exhale. "I thought as much," Evelyn said, her professional calm tinged with something that sounded like satisfaction. "My client will be very pleased to hear this. Does any proof of his claims still exist?" "Everything," Isabella said. "My mother has it. Blueprints, notes, and the original partnership agreement." "Excellent." Evelyn's voice was sharp, energized. "This changes the game entirely. This is no longer just a harassment suit. This is the reclamation of a birthright. Have your mother secure those documents. Do not let them out of her sight. I will arrange for a secure courier to retrieve them in the morning." The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. The limousine, having achieved its purpose of broadcasting Sinclair's power and crippling the restaurant for 3 days, finally vanished. But its absence was replaced by a more insidious form of pressure. Donovan Sinclair, it turned out, had sources everywhere. Perhaps it was Mr. Peterson, who, in a desperate attempt to save his restaurant, had relayed Isabella's name in her refusal to back down. Or perhaps it was a fellow employee, envious of the strange, powerful forces now surrounding Isabella. Whatever the source, Sinclair learned that the waitress he had tried to crush was not only fighting back, but was also digging into a past he thought long buried. He reacted not with the theatrical arrogance of the limousine, but with the cold, precise cruelty of a corporate predator. The empire struck back. The first blow came from the media. An article appeared on a popular city gossip blog, then was picked up by more mainstream news outlets. The headline read, "Waitress in Limo Standoff Accused of Extortion Plot." The story, citing anonymous sources close to the situation, painted Isabella as a calculating opportunist. It claimed she had a history of aggressive behavior and that she had tried to extort a large sum of money from Sinclair at the restaurant, only concocting her story of disrespect when he refused. It was a complete inversion of the truth, skillfully crafted to poison public opinion against her. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, messages from strangers calling her a gold digger and a fraud. The second blow was more personal. A black sedan, the same model favored by corporate security firms, began parking across the street from the hotel. It was there in the morning when she looked out the window, and it was there at night. When she left, it followed at a discreet distance. They weren't hiding. They wanted to be seen. It was a classic intimidation tactic designed to make her feel watched, isolated, and unsafe. The third blow was aimed at her family. A building inspector made a surprise visit to her mother's small mortgage home, citing an anonymous tip. He spent hours combing through the property, issuing citations for a dozen minor, previously ignored infractions, a slightly cracked walkway, an aging fuse box, a fence that was 2 and too high. The list came with a hefty set of fines and a strict deadline to bring everything up to code. A financial burden Elena could not possibly bear. The pressure was immense, a multi-pronged assault designed to break her spirit. Chloe called, her voice a frightened whisper. "Izzy, people at the restaurant are talking. They're saying you made all this up. Mr. Peterson told everyone he had to fire you because you threatened a customer. I know it's not true, but they're scared." Isabella sat in her hotel room, the blinds drawn. The hum of the air conditioning, a poor substitute for the sounds of a real home. Doubt began to creep in, a poisonous weed in the garden of her newfound resolve. Was she wrong to have done this? She had unleashed a monster, and it was now coming for everyone she loved. She clutched the phone, her knuckles white, tempted to call Evelyn Reed and tell her it was over, that she surrendered. Her mother called before she could. Isabella expected to hear fear in Elena's voice. She expected tears, pleas to stop before Sinclair destroyed them completely. Instead, her mother's voice was filled with a strength Isabella hadn't heard in years. "They came today," Elena said, her tone defiant. "The inspector, he thought he could frighten me. I told him to send the bill to my daughter's lawyer." Isabella was stunned. "Mal, you're not scared." "I was scared my whole life," Elena replied, her voice ringing with conviction. "I was scared of the bills, scared of the future, scared of the shadow your grandfather lived under. But seeing what that man, that animal son, is doing to you, I'm not scared anymore. I'm angry. Your grandfather's anger is in me now." "The trunk is safe, Isabella. Don't you dare give up. This is not just for us. It's for your non-no. You show them who we are." Her mother's words were like a shot of adrenaline to the heart. The fear receded, replaced once again by that cold, hard resolve. She was a Rosie. She would not be broken. She picked up the phone and called Evelyn Reed. "He's coming after my family," she said, her voice devoid of any tremor. "The media investigators, inspectors. He's trying to bury me." "I know," Evelyn said calmly. "We expected this. It's the Sinclair playbook. Don't worry about the inspector. We'll handle it. Ignore the media and the men in the car just for show. They won't touch you." She paused. Then her voice took on a new, sharper edge. "He's acting out of fear, Isabella. The documents your mother has are dynamite. He knows it. And now he's given us exactly what we need. A clear, documented pattern of harassment. It's time to stop playing defense." "What do we do?" Isabella asked. "We arrange a meeting," Evelyn said, a hint of steel in her voice. "Not in a courtroom. Not in my office. On his territory. We are going to walk into the lion's den, and we are going to show him the teeth of the man his father robbed." The headquarters of Sinclair Industries was a monument to brutalist architecture and corporate power, a towering skyscraper of dark glass and steel. It pierced the city's skyline, casting a long shadow over the buildings below. It was a place designed to make people feel small and insignificant, a fortress of modern capitalism. 2 days later, Isabella Rossi walked through its cavernous marble lobby, flanked by Evelyn Reed. The air was cool and smelled of success. Men and women in expensive suits moved with brisk, self-important strides, their faces illuminated by the glow of their smartphones. They glanced at Isabella, her simple but elegant dress chosen by Evelyn, marking her as an outsider. They saw a young woman. They had no idea she was there to lay siege to their king. Evelyn had arranged the meeting through a blistering legal letter that hinted at long-suppressed historical claims and irrefutable proof of foundational fraud. It was a high-stakes gamble designed to provoke Sinclair into a direct confrontation on his own turf, where his arrogance would be at its peak. It had worked. He had agreed to a meeting in the main boardroom on the top floor. They were escorted up in a private, silent elevator that moved with unnerving speed. The doors opened directly into the boardroom antechamber. Inside, Donovan Sinclair was waiting. He was not alone. He was flanked by his own team of lawyers, 4 grim-faced men in dark suits. Sinclair stood by the floor, toesiling window, a silhouette against the panoramic view of the city he owned. He turned as they entered a slow, deliberate movement. His face was a mask of contemptuous amusement. "Ms. Rosie," he began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "to what do I owe the honor? Have you come to return the money you tried to extort from me? Or perhaps your high-priced ambulance-chasing attorney has some other demand?" He glanced at Evelyn. "I do hope this is worth my time." Evelyn Reed was unfazed. "We are here to discuss the founding of this company, Mr. Sinclair, specifically the contributions of a man named Antonio Rossi." Sinclair actually laughed, a short barking sound. "Who? I've never heard of him." "My father, Augustus Sinclair, founded this company on his own with his own sweat and brilliance." "That is a convenient and profitable version of history," Evelyn said, stepping forward and placing her leather briefcase on the enormous mahogany boardroom table. "We are here to present a more accurate one." She opened the case and took out a series of large, protected folders. From the first, she carefully removed a set of original, hand-drawn blueprints. The paper was yellowed, the blue ink faded, but the genius of the design was timeless. She spread them on the table. "These," she announced, her voice ringing in the silent room, "are Antonio Ross's original schematics for the Ripe Fuel Injection System dated 1974. The system that became the cornerstone of Sinclair Industries' automotive division for its first 2 decades. Sinclair's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. Sinclair himself walked over to the table, his smile faltering as he looked at the drawings. He recognized the design. Isabella spoke for the first time, her voice clear and strong, resonating with her mother's words. "My grandfather, Antonio Rossi, was your father's partner. This was his work. Your father stole it. An outrageous and slanderous accusation," Sinclair snapped, regaining his composure. "You have no proof of any partnership. These could be forgeries." "Then perhaps you'll recognize this," Evelyn said, pulling out the next document. It was the old partnership agreement. She laid it next to the blueprints, the Sinclair Rossi Automotive Concepts Partnership Agreement, signed by both Augustus Sinclair and Antonio Rossi. And on the back, she carefully turned it over, is Mr. Rossi's contemporaneous account of how your father invoked a fraudulent clause to dissolve the partnership and seize all intellectual property 1 week before closing the deal with Ford. The room was thick with tension. Sinclair's lawyers began whispering furiously to him. For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear appeared in Donovan Sinclair's cold blue eyes. "This is history," he spat. "Ancient history. It's meaningless. You can't prove a thing. It's the word of a dead man against my father's legacy." "Ordinarily, you might be right," Evelyn said calmly. "But we don't just have history. We have the present." She gestured to Isabella. This was the part they had rehearsed. Isabella stepped forward, her initial nervousness replaced by a surge of adrenaline. She laid another set of papers on the table. Not old documents, but modern-day engineering analyses and market reports compiled by an expert Evelyn had hired. "We had your company's current flagship product, the Sinclair V8 EcoTrust engine, independently analyzed," Isabella stated, her voice unwavering. "Our expert found that despite 50 years of modifications, the core principles of its energy efficiency, the unique fuel-to-air compression ratio, and the spray nozzle design are still fundamentally based on my grandfather's original RT-type schematics. His genius isn't your company's history, Mr. Sinclair. It's the bedrock of your most profitable division right now in 2025. The blood drained from Sinclair's face. This wasn't about a historical claim anymore. It was about the very legitimacy of his current success. He slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You think you can walk in here with some old papers and some junk science and threaten me? Who is backing you? Who paid for this expert? I'll ruin them. He stared at Evelyn, his eyes blazing with fury. Who is your client? Evelyn Reed allowed a small, cold smile to touch her lips. The moment had come. My client isn't one person, Mr. Sinclair. You see, your father wasn't the only person in this company who built his career by stepping on others. You learned his lessons well. Her voice dropped, becoming a blade. My client is a consortium, a group of former Sinclair Industries executives, engineers, and division heads. People you fired to cut costs. People whose projects you stole and took credit for. People whose pensions you gutted in the last restructuring. They've been waiting, pooling their resources, looking for the right opportunity to expose the rot at the heart of this company. Your public spectacle with Ms. Rosie was the opportunity they were waiting for. Sinclair was reeling, stumbling back as if physically struck. The thought of a conspiracy within his own ranks, an army of his own making, was a devastating blow. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She delivered the final personal twist. They hired me for a very specific reason. Donovan, she said, using his first name for the first time, the sound of it, a sharp crack in the silent room. They knew my history. You see, I have my own reasons for taking this case. My grandfather was a man named Arthur Reed. He was your father's first lawyer, the man who drafted this very partnership agreement. She pointed to the document on the table. On his deathbed, he confessed to me. The guilt of what he helped your father do to Antonio Rossi had haunted him his entire life. He told me everything. He left me his own private records, corroborating every word of Mr. Rossi's account. She looked Sinclair directly in the eye, her own gaze filled with a righteous fire that had been burning for years. My client isn't just a consortium of your enemies, Donovan. My client is history. My client is justice. And we are here to collect. The aftermath of the boardroom confrontation was not a loud explosion, but a swift and silent implosion. Faced with a mountain of evidence, the threat of a massive lawsuit that would drag the company's dirty laundry into the public sphere, and a brewing rebellion from a consortium of embittered ex-executives, the Sinclair Industries Board of Directors acted with the ruthless efficiency of self-preservation. Within a week, an emergency meeting was called. Donovan Sinclair, the man who had inherited a kingdom and ruled it with an iron fist, was unceremoniously ousted as CEO. The official story was that he was stepping down to pursue other interests, a piece of corporate jargon so thin it was transparent. The real story, however, began to leak first in whispers on financial news blogs, then in a torrent of articles detailing the scandalous origins of the company and the decades of lies that had sustained it. Sinclair's name became synonymous not with power, but with fraud. Isabella Rossi did not become the new CEO. She did not want to. The goal was never to conquer Sinclair's world, but to reclaim the honor of her own. Guided by Evelyn Reed and the consortium, a settlement was reached out of court. It was a landmark agreement. The Rossi family received a staggering financial compensation, a sum that rewrote their family's history of struggle in an instant. But more importantly, the settlement included a significant non-controlling stake in Sinclair Industries and the public official acknowledgement of Antonio Rossi as a co-founder of the company. His name was restored, his genius finally recognized. The first thing Isabella did was not to buy a mansion or a sports car. She established the Antonio Rossi Foundation for Young Inventors, an organization dedicated to providing funding and mentorship to brilliant minds who lack the resources to bring their ideas to life, the very position her grandfather had been in half a century ago. She set up its headquarters not in a gleaming downtown tower, but in a refurbished warehouse in the same industrial neighborhood where her grandfather's original workshop had been. Her mother, Elena, was by her side, the years of worry seemingly melting from her face, replaced by a radiant pride. Together they hung a large framed portrait of a young, smiling Antonio Rossi in the foundation's entrance hall. One afternoon, a few months after the foundation opened, a man walked in, looking hesitant and out of place. He was tall and broad-shouldered, though he seemed to carry himself with less rigidity now. It was Arthur Sinclair's former driver. He was no longer in his crisp black suit, but in a simple polo shirt and jeans. "Miss Rosie," he said, his voice quiet, devoid of its former evasive tone. He held a worn cap in his hands. I just wanted to come and apologize." Isabella looked at him surprised. "For what?" "For that day with the limo," he said, looking at the floor. "I knew it was wrong, but it was my job. Mr. Sinclair, he paid well. I have a family, a daughter in college. I just did what I was told. I never felt good about it." Isabella saw not an instrument of a billionaire's cruelty, but just a man like any other trying to provide for his family. She saw the faded tattoo of the Swift on the back of his neck and was reminded of her grandfather's sketches. It was a symbol of speed and precision, something a man who appreciated fine engineering might choose. "I understand," she said, her voice gentle. "Thank you for coming to say that. It means something. I lost my job when he was forced out." Arthur continued, "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I respect what you did. You have more courage than any of those men in their fancy boardrooms." Isabella thought for a moment. The foundation was growing, and they needed reliable people. "The foundation has a small fleet of vehicles," she said. "We transport students and equipment. We need a logistics manager, someone trustworthy who understands the city. It's not a chauffeur's job. You'd be in charge if you're interested." A look of disbelief, then profound gratitude washed over Arthur's face. "Yes, Miss Rosie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I would be very interested. Thank you." As he left, Isabella looked around the bustling workshop at the young, bright-eyed inventors working on their projects, their futures bright with possibility. She realized the truth of the 7 words she had spoken in the restaurant that night. Money couldn't buy respect, but it could, if used correctly, buy justice. It could restore a legacy, and it could build something new and beautiful from the wreckage of the old. She finally understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or stock prices, but in the ability to create opportunities to right wrongs and to build a future her grandfather would have been proud of. Isabella's incredible journey shows us that true strength isn't found in a bank account, but in the courage to stand up for what is right. Her story began with a simple act of defiance against a powerful man, but it became a testament to the enduring power of truth and integrity. She didn't just win a battle for herself, she reclaimed a stolen history for her family, and in doing so created a new legacy of hope for others. Her story is a powerful reminder that one person armed with conviction can indeed change the world, proving that respect is never for sale, and true wealth is the positive impact we leave behind. If Isabella's story of courage and justice resonated with you, please give this video a like to show your support. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner strength. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life dramas that will empower and inspire you. What part of Isabella's fight impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments below.